Wake now my senses. 298, wake now my senses. Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in awe. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of one. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the white sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now my conscience with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiant ear. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
Good morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today is Sunday, October 6th, and I'm so glad we're here together, sharing space, sharing time, and sharing our connections. If you're new to our congregation, we extend a special welcome. If you're joining us online, thank you for taking the time to make a connection with us. We're so glad you're here. Newcomers are encouraged to attend a newcomers meetup in the Redmond Room, just down the hall on the left, directly after service today. You will be warmly greeted by a member of our congregation who will be on hand to answer any questions you may have about us and the work we do. And if you're joining us online, please introduce yourself in the chat and complete the newcomer survey, which can be found at UUAA.org/newcomer survey so that we can better connect with you. As we gradually move into the autumnal part of our year, we begin slowing down from the heyday of summer into the more contemplative, reflective fall feelings. Days are shorter, nights are longer, and here in Michigan, it starts to be jacket season. And we can anticipate one big snow at the end of October to kick off winter. Our nests are being cozied, soup recipes are researched, family gatherings are planned, and a time for reflection and connection begins. In the Jewish faith tradition, fall brings the high holy day of the new year in Rosh Hashanah, where your future can be inscribed in the book of life. A time for you to reflect on what kind of person you want to be. And you may ask yourself in the upcoming days, what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of commitment do I want to honor? What kind of contributions do I want to make to my community and to the world? The beginning of autumn also marks the beginning of our annual stewardship campaign, in which we ask you, how might your personal commitment to UUAA fuel the future in Washtenaw County and in the wider world? the energy of action in your individual or household contributions to our stewardship fund fuel change, growth, and viability for not only our UUAA community, but that of Greater Washtenaw County, Michigan, and the world. After all, one is all it takes to start something beautiful. So let's start right now with a few breaths to center us as we prepare for our time together. We are gathered in community. We are gathered for worship.
As Joe just reminded us, the celebration of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, happened this past week. One of the most well-known Rosh Hashanah traditions is the eating of apples dipped in honey. This is a symbol of the sweetness that is hoped for in the new year. In fact, the traditional greeting for Rosh Hashanah is Lashana Tova, a sweet year. There is something truly beautiful about beginning the new year during the time of harvest, when the toils of planting and tending are over, and the time has come to enjoy the fruits of that labor. The new year starts with a time of bounty, celebration, and sweetness that is not disconnected from work, but is the result of it. It's just that the work and the difficulty is at the end of one year, while the celebration and the sweetness is at the beginning of another. Sometimes we need dividing lines in our lives. The toil of the week has brought us here to this moment, and I invite you now to set down any emotional burden or worry that you may have brought in with you. The stresses and the irritations of the outside world are just that, outside. We enter now into a different kind of time, sacred time. Unitarian Universalists often light a chalice at the beginning of our services to mark the beginning of sacred time. And in doing so, we create a line in our lives to let go of the outside world for a moment and to rest here in a time out of time, a time set aside for reflection and celebration of deeper things. This morning's chalice will be lit by Colleen Crowley. Will you please join me on the chancel? Those of you who are joining remotely or watching this later, I invite you to light a chalice as well, either literally or just a good old-fashioned hand chalice, and type your name and where your chalice is in the chat box, if you will. Wherever you are, please join me in our chalice lighting words. We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. Thank you, Colleen. This coming week is another important Jewish holiday, which is Yom Kippur. This is the Day of Atonement, when the faithful are called to turn away from destructive patterns and toward that which gives life. It is only human for us to fall short of our aspirations of how we will live, and Unitarian Universalism also has a mechanism for atonement. Ours begins with the creation of covenants that express who we are and how we want to be. And when we fall short of our covenants, because we will always fall short of our covenants, we are invited to make things right with those we may have harmed, to turn away from the harmful words or actions, and to come back into covenant. It is a simple process and one that we use often. And we also need to be reminded regularly of our covenants to help us live up to those aspirations. I invite you to join me now in recommitting to the covenant of our congregation. The spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth in love, and to help one another.
The oft-repeated phrase, "we can do so much more together than we can apart," inspires us to reach out, make connections, and unite in a common goal of improving the world around us. But let us remember that every together started with individuals making connections with each other. Each we started with a me, seeking another me to make magic, make art, to make a difference. We UUs understand that no matter our differences, we're in this together. And in every sanctuary, every nursery, every studio, garden, and gathering space, we are coming together to teach and learn from each other. Every soft, welcoming voice extended to another, every act of kindness is a way of coming together, of sharing love, care, compassion, and concern that can expand the world over, enhancing and enriching lives all around the globe. Today's story, I Am One, a Book of Action, beautifully illustrates how one is all it takes to start something beautiful. This book is written by Susan Verde and the art by Peter H. Reynolds. How do I make a difference? It seems like a tall order for one so small. But beautiful things start with just one. One seed to start a garden. One stroke to start a masterpiece. One note to start a melody. One step to start a journey. One brick to start breaking down walls. And I can speak one gentle word to start a conversation. I can use my one soft voice to start a friendship. I can perform one act of kindness to start a connection. I can share one tender hug to start caring. I can light one candle to start leading the way. I can make one drop in the water to start ripples that become swells, then waves. Traveling over oceans, across borders and boundaries, landing on distant shores to start a chain reaction, inspire of movement, make a change. I am one, and I can take action. We are each one, and we can take action. One by one, we can make a difference. Because one is all it takes to start something beautiful. The end.
Good morning. On this Sunday, we're focusing on the nature of action and why we take certain actions, how we decide whether an action is the right thing to do or not to do. In that spirit, I wanted to share a little bit of information that we shared with our community by email about a week to 10 days ago, but not everybody may have received or seen that message. We have changed the children's recessional, the song that we sing as the children are departing. Those who are regulars in our community, you'll know that in the past couple of years we've been singing a piece called Where You Go, I Will Go by the composer and lyricist Shoshana Jedweb. Shoshana Jedweb has made it clear and asked that any communities or organizations that believe that what has been happening in Palestine constitutes a genocide not use her music. This past summer, the Unitarian Universalist Association, which we belong to, adopted a resolution in support of Palestinian human rights. And while that resolution does not explicitly say that what is occurring in Palestine is a genocide, it does place us in solidarity with the people of Palestine and the suffering that has been taking place there. Recognizing that and honoring that, we're also going to honor Shoshana Jedweb's request that such communities not utilize her music. This is a little bit similar to what we had to do a few years ago. A prior children's recessional was Go Now in Peace, which the composer and lyricist of which is a Methodist minister by the name of Natalie Sleeth. And Reverend Sleeth had asked prior to her death that communities not organically or spontaneously change the lyrics of Go Now in Peace, which had become a somewhat common practice in Unitarian Universalist communities, including ours. And we chose to honor Reverend Sleeth's request that her art, her creation, be sung as it is, and we switched pieces. So the decision that we shared is that we're going to be singing This Little Light of Mine as a children's recessional. This is for now. Try it out, see how it feels. If you have suggestions, we are very open to those suggestions, and a few months from now, we may try something different. But for now, we invite you to remain where you're seated, except our youngest among us, and they will follow their adult teachers and leaders for this Sunday out of the sanctuary to their gathering spaces. As a reminder, parents and caregivers of elementary-age kids should pick up their children at the lower level following the conclusion of the service. The rest of us can remain seated. We can turn to 118 if you need the words for This Little Light of Mine. Have a beautiful morning, young ones. Today marks the launch of our annual stewardship campaign. This is our community's annual fundraising drive. To help us launch into this annual time together, Ed Lynn, a member of our finance team and former administrator of the congregation, will share a few words. Ed.
Thank you, Manish. Good morning. Because we are self-funding, every year in October, we launch our stewardship drive, our pledge drive. Let me begin with a brief overview of our finances. This year, our budget is $1.2 million, or $23,250 each week. Since pledge income accounts for 90% of our total revenue, each week we need just under $21,000 in pledges to function. Now, this may seem like a lot of money, and it is. The good news is that we have about 500 members pitching in. So we can do this. We are doing this now. You should have received in your stewardship mailing this week. We have themed this year's campaign, Energy of Action. Sound familiar? I highly encourage you to review the enclosure. Reading the enclosure, I was, to use the British term, gobsmacked. I won't even try to highlight some of the 87 social justice actions listed. But there is truly a veritable heap of energy in those actions. And this list does not include all the Sunday volunteer work, the choir, the ushers, the social hall volunteers, the SGD teachers. And if you were at the climate revival last weekend, you witnessed even more energy and involvement. Between our gatherings on Saturday and our beautiful service on Sunday, this space was alive with activity. How better to describe it than energy in action? To continue, and if possible, expand our energy of action next year, we will need additional funds. Inflation, although lower, remains with us. Our property insurance increased 23% this year, and next year we expect to pay more, over $100,000 in medical insurance premiums for our staff than we do for our mortgage, which is also over $100,000. In addition, during the COVID shutdown, we cut back on staff, which was 70% of our costs just to survive. Next year, we hope to add part-time administrative staff for tasks now done by volunteers or not done at all. So, how do we fund this? As I said earlier, we have about 500 members. So the response to how do we fund this question is not the other guy will pay. No, working together enables all of our accomplishments, and working together will enable this solution. For many of us, an extra $5 a week is doable. If every member, not pledge unit, but member did this, an extra $5 a week, that would total $125,000. Adds up. There is power in numbers. Remember the 87 social justice actions. And since some of us are financially constrained, if others of us who are more privileged or lucky could increase by slightly more, we are home. So, I make 3 requests of you today. First, review the Energy of Action letter and enclosure, and not just an Evelyn Woods speed reading scan, but reflect on what 500 involved people committed to a better world are doing. Be gobsmacked. You may even find an activity you want to join. Second, look at your present pledge and consider increasing it. As I said, relatively small increments from each of us add up to significant money from all of us. Third, submit your pledge as soon as possible, please. I've been involved in this for years, and I actually enjoy it. But rounding up the final pledges so we can pull together a budget for the next year is the most unelevating part of the whole process. So, please, pledge in October. And as a small incentive, This year, we will be drawing from all pledgers after the second, third, and fourth week of the drive for a gift basket of goodies. The basket is now at the pledge table at the front door, so you can take a look at it on the way out. The earlier you pledge, the more drawings you are eligible for. So, our 500 members are making an impact. Look at this list. This is a lot of energy and a lot of action. The world needs us, and we are responding. This is impressive. Be gobsmacked. Think of how a modest pledge increase by every one of us who can aggregates into some serious money. Please make your pledge, and then let's go out and do more good. Thank you.
We come now to the time in our service that we set aside for the UU value of generosity. So what Ed just told us about is the annual pledge drive. And it's easy to get these two confused because they both involve financial contributions to the congregation, but they are not the same. One way to think about it is the annual pledge drive is how we fund our mission and our goals for the year to come through the creation of a budget. And the weekly offering is a recommitment that we make to the congregation and its mission. Pledging is planful, the offering is spontaneous generosity. This is our weekly re-upping of our commitment to the congregation and everything we strive for and hope to be in this world. It is saying on a weekly basis, yes, I want to be a part of this. And sometimes we do a third thing, and today is one of those days. Sometimes we have a special offering that supports organizations that share our values and our commitments. Today's offering, as I said, is one of those opportunities. And the organization that we are supporting today is the UUAA Disaster Relief Fund. I'm sure that we are all well aware of the devastation that Hurricane Helene wrought across the southeastern United States last week. There are over 200 dead and hundreds more still missing. Our contributions to the UUAA Disaster Relief Fund will go to support UU congregations and recognized UU nonprofit entities that were impacted by Hurricane Helene and similar disasters. There are many ways to give, including online at uuaa.org/giving. You can text UUAA to 73256, or you can leave a cash or check in the offering baskets. As the ushers come forward, I invite you to give generously in support of the good works of the UUAA Disaster Relief Fund and our shared work to co-create the world we dream about. Today's collection will now be gratefully given and received. Will the ushers please come forward? I invite you now to rise and body your spirit, holding gratitude and generosity in your hearts, and join in our words of dedication. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you. Please be seated.
This week marks 1 year since violence broke out in the Middle East, leading to an ongoing war that has brought suffering to the ordinary day in, day out lives of people in Israel, Palestine, and now Lebanon. It's worth pausing to note and to honor that. Would you join me in a brief pause? This 1 year mark reminded me of my first month or two in our nation's diplomatic corps. As a new diplomat in an orientation period, we were taken, all of us en masse, to the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. The major point of which was to remember not just the cost when diplomacy fails, but also the costs when our nation needs to move beyond diplomacy to action and fails to do so in a timely manner. In that spirit of reflecting on the nature of our own actions, our own individual actions, I'd like to invite you to take a few moments of silent reflection on this question. Think of a time when you had to make a decision of moral significance. How did you know that what you decided to do or not do was the morally right thing? Think of a time when you had to make a decision of moral significance. How did you know that what you decided to do or not do was the right thing? Let us join together in a few moments of silent reflection. Remaining seated, I invite you to turn in your gray hymnals to hymn 31, Name Unnamed. We'll sing verses 1 through 3.
Name
How do any of us know whether we're doing the right thing? Not just major life decisions, but also the day in, day out, smaller decisions that become important reflections of our character over time. How do we know that we're doing the right thing at any given moment? I want to share a story with you and invite you into my life as a minister, maybe somewhere in the 15 to 20 years ago range. The end of a summer, and end of summer leave, the very last day, in fact. So I was returning home to my congregation in Florida from some time in Europe. I was at the airport in Reykjavik, Iceland, catching an Iceland Air flight from Reykjavik to Orlando, an 8.5-hour flight. And in the waiting lounge of Keflavik Airport, waiting to board, I notice a pretty large high school age group. And I'm traveling by myself, so I thought what some of us might also have thought, that teenagers are fairly boisterous and energetic, and they're likely to be up for the entire flight. I hope that I'm not seated near them. Of course, it's a given that the moment you think that thought, that's exactly what's going to happen. So I'm seated on the plane, smack in the middle of this large group of teenagers, and I start to piece together that this is not a school group. School's out in the summer anyway. This is some kind of church group, maybe a mission group. I'm seated in the aisle seat, and my seat partner in the middle seat right next to me is clearly one of the group leaders. On a very long flight, my last day of vacation, and I'm seated next to another religious leader of some kind. I start noticing that the teenagers, the kids, one by one, they're coming by and handing the guy next to me, my seatmate, their airline-provided free headphones. Potentially, I assume, because they're not allowed to listen to the music or watch the airline-provided movies. This piques my curiosity, so I start flipping through the magazine. What are the music channels, and what are the movies the Iceland Air has selected? And I can't find anything potentially disagreeable or questionable, and this is an evangelical mission trip. And I'm clearly seated next to the group's leader. Now, here's my question. 8.5-hour transatlantic flight. What would you do in my shoes? Don't say your response out loud. Please play along at home. Just come up with what your next move would be on this flight. And when you've got your answer, lock it in and remember it. You're not changing it. So take just a moment. What would you do if you were in my shoes? We're going to come back to this Iceland Air flight in a little bit. For now, I want to invite us to notice that the fields of religion, philosophy, and ethics, just to name three, are absolutely obsessed with this question of what are you going to do next? Not on the Iceland Air flight, but life in general. What are you going to do? What are your actions that you're going to take and bring alive with your life and your being? A quick rundown, a quick reminder of the various possibilities these traditions give us. From the field of religion, Christianity gives us heaven or hell, where our actions in the here and now will inform whether we go to one or the other, or whether we're even resurrected after death at all. So deeply are these understandings ingrained in U.S. culture and society that that for one of my kids, the very first question of any kind that was spiritual or religious in nature, this child asked me whether heaven or hell were real. You can imagine having to come up with a UU response to that. Judaism. This week, the time period of the High Holy Days, the book of life is open for this brief time in the Jewish year. And it's an opportunity to reflect on your actions during the past year and, as all of us do, what mistakes you may have made. And in taking time to reflect on that, on the mistaken actions you undertook, to be in touch with the spirit of atonement and repair, owning what those mistakes were and, where possible, making amends and repair, so that your name gets inscribed in the book of life in a good way and you can have a good future. Buddhism. Buddhism gives us ongoing daily spiritual practices like meditation so that we can work with and calm down the nonstop inner thoughts and energy that goes on ceaselessly without end, find a way to calm it down just a bit, just enough, so that we can make sound, balanced decisions in our lives. Hinduism, my religion of origin, faith tradition, so obsessed with what its adherents might do in the world that based on the date, time, and location of your birth, plus the socio-economic, cultural location of your birth family, in other words, caste, your future career and vocation is given to you, and who you may and may not marry is also given to you, all from the moment of birth. And if all that good, orderly direction isn't enough, we're also told, in addition, to watch with great care all our deeds and words, because karma exists, a cosmic balance sheet that will be tallied up at the time of one's death with all the little pluses, all the little tiny good things we've done, and the big good things and all the negatives, be they small or large. And you don't, when that cosmic balance sheet is added up, want to be reborn as a snail that someone might step on. The philosophical and ethical traditions are equally obsessed with what you or I might do or might not do. We have our Greek friend, who you may have read in high school or undergrad. I read him in both, Aristotle, who gave us Nicomachean ethics, also known as virtue ethics. The idea that there are certain virtues that we're seeking to bring alive through our actions, through our words and deeds, and that each situation is specific. Each context is different, moment to moment, so we must assess what the situation or the context calls for and which virtues apply in that situation, and not do too much, an excess of the virtue, and not do a deficit, too little of the virtue. We must somehow find a way to discern the happy medium path in any given situation and bring alive just the right amount of those virtues that apply in a given situation. In contrast, German philosopher Immanuel Kant gives us deontological ethics and the categorical imperative, which is just about as far opposite as you can get from Aristotle's notion of virtue ethics. Kant believes that there are some things that are simply universally true, always true. And our goal in life is to discern what those universal truths are and then to live in fidelity to those truths. Because there are universal truths, there's absolutely a wrong decision and a right decision we can make when it comes to important moral choices. Jeremy Bentham gives rise to another way of thinking about our actions and deeds, in what's called utilitarian ethics. Now, you all know how much I love science fiction, so I can't resist but draw on our friend, the character Spock from Star Trek, in particular the Wrath of Khan movie, in which, in his dying scene, Spock says, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one or the few." This is utilitarian ethics. Do the maximum good for the maximum number of people, always. This can be taken and understood in an exaggerated way in terms of how we bring alive our politics today. Think of how things have been going in our nation for about 15 to 20 years. Significant elections are won by very slim margins, something like 50.5%. Is that a significant enough majority that should be deciding for everybody what everybody as a whole should be doing? There are important ethical questions in that. What constitutes the maximum good? What constitutes the maximum number of people? Is 50.5% a significant amount to say that's the maximum number of people we should care about or be concerned with? Okay, so one of the things I love about ethics are ethical case studies. So I'm now going to invite you to imagine being with me again, and an even younger version of me. So the one on the Iceland air flight is about 15 to 20 years ago. Let's go way, way back to when I was 20 years old at Georgetown University, raised in a conservative Orthodox Hindu household, in which the cultural and religious expectation is that I will have a heterosexual marriage, I will give birth to biologically related children, and through all of that, my ancestral lineage is propagated. To not live into that cultural, religious expectation and familial expectation is potentially a betrayal of all three of those things, of family, of culture, and of religion. Not only is it a betrayal, but it potentially brings shame not just to my immediate family, but my entire extended family, my whole clan, if you would. You see, this is why I got interested in ethics. It was very personal for me. How does one make these decisions? How do we decide what the right thing to do is? What would you do if you were the 20-year-old version of me, and that's what you were contending with? What would you do? What if I just tweak the situation slightly? What if instead of being ethnically Indian and from an ethnically Indian and Hindu background, what if I'm from a liberal white Western family? Is the right thing to do easier then? Should it be easier? Should it matter that I tweaked just that one facet of the situation I gave you? What if instead I tweak the situation in a different direction? What if instead of having been born and living in the United States, I was born in India? What if I was living in a small village of 3,000 people? What if I had never left that village in my entire life and I did not have the financial means to do so? What's the right thing to do then? Is it muddier? Is it less clear if the situation is tweaked in that direction? What if the ideal thing to do, regardless of whether it is right or wrong, might also get you killed? It may be the case that Aristotle's exhortation that the context and the situation matters is true. One thing that the field of psychology tells us is that individually, when it comes to our own individual decision-making, we are very concerned about the situation and the circumstances, the context. The field of psychology shows us that, when it comes to assessing our own ethical and moral decision-making, we typically consider the context thoroughly and deeply and well. So if I have to make a decision in my life that is complicated, I will look at all these contextual factors that are outside of my control. Based on all those many, many, many considerations, I will try to discern what the best thing I can do is. It may be imperfect, but this is what is possible. And we know that when it comes to very challenging or hard ethical or moral decisions, that is often true for us on an individual level. Yet, when it comes to assessing, observing, having an opinion about, having a judgment about the ethical or moral decisions that other people make, we don't typically take into account all those contextual factors. We discount them, and in fact, we'll often assume that other people's decision-making is a sign of their character or lack thereof. So look at how important and significant that is. When we, in the field of psychology, this is called the fundamental attribution error, and this is an important one. We give ourselves every benefit of the doubt based on context, and typically we do not give others the same. Let's return now to Iceland Air. I invited you to lock in your answers. I'm curious now, if you were me and you were on that 8.5-hour flight, you just figured out what's going on and what you're in the middle of, who is seated right next to you, what would you do? Shout out a couple of answers. Change seats. It was summer. Every seat was taken, yeah, but good thinking if possible. Noise-canceling headphones. What else? Engage in conversation with your seatmate. These are good possibilities. Let me tell you what actually happened. So I immediately began to take out my headphones, every book and magazine I have with me. I pretended to be asleep if need be, because it was very clear the gentleman next to me was itching to have a conversation about anything, and I was pretty sure it was about their mission trip. I did everything humanly possible to be a no-contact zone, including during the meal service, when most people will take their headphones off to talk to the air steward going by. I was even then totally ensured I was occupied, until my fateful error of reaching for some utensil or something and not fully paying attention, and wouldn't you know it, I knocked that cup of water right over all of them. Oh, you gotta hate that when that happens. I hate it when it happens to me, so I know I'm feeling bad. I just did it to somebody. Well, there you go, now I'm stuck. I have to apologize. Well, that opens the whole road to conversation, because you can't just apologize. If they're gracious enough to forgive you for being wet on a transatlantic flight, you might as well talk to the person. So I'm now stuck. And indeed, I shared with this individual that I'm an ordained Unitarian Universalist colleague, and I got to hear all about their mission trip, which I knew was exactly what he wanted to talk to me about. And I'll admit that I did so with a tremendous chip on my shoulder, because I know how these evangelical mission trips kind of go. They go and do stuff in impoverished countries with underserved or people who don't have access to the same level of resources that we do in the West, all with the intention of gaining converts through either Bible study or classes or whatever else is done. So I'm listening to this, and what starts to unfold is some of those plot elements. I hear about the schools that the kids had been building, literally from scratch, taking pieces of timber and building walls. I hear about similarly work with medical clinics, building those out of nothing, out of scratch. They'd been in Eastern Europe somewhere. I heard about the money that they raised to help bring a nurse or a doctor to the medical clinic that they were helping create. And all around the edges of these storytelling, I kept trying to poke and find the little thing that I was expecting, which is the actual evangelical work of conversion. And I wasn't really getting what I was expecting. So I finally, my inner frustration reached a point where I just asked very directly, but you build schools and medical clinics and hand out Bibles, right? You invite people to go to the school so you can do Bible study classes, right? And the person seated next to me responds, no. We believe that the best way to get people interested in who we are is to show others who we are. We don't tell them about us. We don't force anything on anyone. Our schools and our clinics are completely free, with no requirement or expectation of anyone joining us in anything religiously. But we do hope that people will ask who we are, and they'll get a sense of not just who we are, but why we're committed to doing good work in the world, and because of that, they'll want to learn more, and not always, but sometimes, maybe even often, that is the case. This sounded so I was floored. Now, I didn't know if I could totally trust what this person was telling me, but I have this inner commitment of my own, which is that I take people at their word unless they've proven to me otherwise. And I just met the guy. I had no reason to think he'd be lying to me, and he'd probably never meet me again, so why should he lie to me? So I, according to my own inner commitment, chose to believe him, that this is probably how they're doing things. Now, this approach of letting your good works speak for you is also true for us as a Unitarian Universalist community. Many of you will have received this in the past week, the Energy of Action Bulletin. If you haven't received it, look for it. It's coming soon, or get one from the office. This is fabulous. This is 4 pages, single-spaced, of all the amazing things that you all, our community, has been engaged in, been doing in the wider world, just for the past year. I didn't bother to count all those elements in there, but I learned from Ed's talk that there's 87 plus things that we've done in the past year to make a positive impact in Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, Southeast Michigan, and beyond. We have demonstrated through our work, through our deeds, that we are a community committed to inclusion for all. We're a community committed to building connection and community beyond our own walls. We're committed to caring for one another and the least among us in the wider world. We're working to combat structures of oppression and discrimination wherever they exist. We're committed to deeply caring for our human interdependence with our planet and with all living beings. We're working to make our human presence on planet Earth both sustainable and positive. And we're committed to generously offering our time, our energy, and our resources to support all of this and so much more. This is how we UUs have been showing up here in Southeast Michigan. Now, after several hours of subsequent conversation and sharing on this flight, just as my plane is landing in Orlando, and my seatmate has had a chance to learn about us Unitarian Universalists and the good work that we do in that congregation that I was serving back in Florida, I turned to my seatmate quite cheekily, because I know I'm never going to see him again, and I say, "You think I'm going to hell, don't you?" And with deep sincerity, he replied, "I'm going to pray for you." Now, there are many ways to potentially take that, but I chose to hear his sincerity and the care in his voice, because what that said to me is that he saw good in me and good in what my community was committed to, enough good that I was worth praying for in his theology of salvation. And I think at our best, isn't that what we can do for one another across difference? Try to understand one another and appreciate one another across those differences, embracing the good that each person is committed to and is helping bring alive through their lives. That is something we Unitarian Universalists are committed to, that our community here is committed to. May such be true for each and every one of us here.
If you could please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing 108, My Life Flows On, in endless song. 108. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentations. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumults and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. But through the darkness round me close, sounds in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon bar, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
Beloveds, head out into this new week, allowing the good in your soul, your essence, your spirit, who you are at your core, to shine forth. Let it be a song that's offered joyously and freely to this world around us, a world that needs the very best that each of us has to offer. We fall short. We make mistakes. And when we do, know that you are encouraged, cheered on, lifted up, and buoyed by this community to return to your commitment to be the best of who you are. Keep returning to that. Keep returning to one another. Go in love and peace. Amen.